welcome to the afternoon session on this first day of the Careers Fair, brought to you by Just a Guy. So for those of you that weren't with me this morning, my name is Ben and I am joined by Marika. So myself and Marika will be taking you through the amazing speakers that we've got this afternoon for you to learn about their careers, the sectors they work in, how they got there, and discover that in most cases, they didn't get there by a nice, easy, linear route. It was all very random, and you don't have to worry about what you want to be right now. There's lots of amazing options for you, and we hope that you'll get a little bit of inspiration from the people and the jobs that you see today. So welcome back, Marika. How are you doing?
Good. I'm super excited for this afternoon session. This morning was great. There was so much, loads of great knowledge, different people from different careers. I actually learnt loads myself.
Oh yeah, and for those of you that caught the 11:30 digital skills session, I need to adopt my power pose to raise the testosterone levels and improve my my presentation skills. So I'm matching you for that one. That's chest out.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, without further ado then, what we will do is introduce our first guest for you today. And I'm really, really pleased to be able to welcome Matt Davies to the Careers Fair. Welcome, Matt. How are you?
Hi, I'm wonderful. It sounds like I missed a fantastic session this morning. My natural slouch has just been shamed by you, I think.
Well, I mean, who knows? This could be the best session yet. We're yet to find out. Let's all get into our power poses and off we go. Rather than me doing you an injustice, Matt, I'll let you introduce yourself and what you do, and then we'll get into a few questions around your role and how you got there and just really interesting stuff for the young people to learn about. Over to you, Matt.
That sounds great. So I can talk about my current job, and I think I have a relatively interesting career history as well, which I think it'd be interesting to go through. So currently I'm on the NHS graduate scheme. So the graduate scheme is mostly offered to people who are fresh out of university, but I joined it as a 34-year-old career changer, which in itself was an interesting experience. And I joined in March 2020. Now, I don't know if anyone watching remembers March 2020, but something happened. I think it was Lovid or Bove, something like that anyway. But it was an interesting time to join the NHS. And since then, I've been heavily involved in COVID work and then managing certain services as a result of that. Are we all right to go through the slides now, Ben, or are we just chit-chatting? So as part of the scheme, I get involved in the day-to-day management of some of the services, and I'm also training. So I do a real formal course in how to be a manager and how to lead things, and that's one of the reasons that I applied to the scheme. Originally, I was a teacher, and what I found as a teacher, and maybe some of the teachers on the call will identify with this, is that you get given leadership responsibilities, but you don't necessarily get taught how to be a leader and how to be a manager. And being a good teacher and being a good manager are very different skills. And I found that I don't think I was a very good manager, to be perfectly frank. And one of the reasons I joined this scheme was that it would explicitly teach me and give me a qualification in being a manager. So I joined March 2020 and almost immediately got co-opted into working into my hospital's COVID command hub. So every hospital in the country at the start of the pandemic had to set up a specialised hub whose job it was to manage the pandemic within their hospital. And they were responsible for implementing all the advice that we were getting from government, for arranging all the supplies, for switching over wards. So say, for example, we had 50 COVID patients. We needed to make sure we had enough beds for 50 COVID patients and also enough beds for the extra COVID patients that we need, while also making sure that we kept other patients away from those COVID patients. So dealing with things like that, I think I had a very frantic time early on, working to make sure that the hospital had enough PPE, had enough equipment, and I have to say it was a really fantastic experience. And I know that sounds strange to say, that something that was so difficult and so frankly unpleasant was actually really enjoyable. But the reason it was enjoyable was because I think a lot of people during the pandemic were at home feeling powerless, and I wasn't. I was involved and I knew what was going on, and I felt like I was actively doing something to help people. And I have to say, it was probably one of the most rewarding 6 months of my career to date. Not that the work I've done since then hasn't been incredibly rewarding. It has been, but it's been a bit more purposeful and a bit more planned and a bit less frantic, which is rewarding in a different way, I think. So I spent 6 months working in that COVID plan hub, supporting the senior leaders in the hospital and the clinicians to manage what was going on the best I could. And then since then, I'm working with a fantastic person called Sarah Walters, who's my manager, and she did this scheme as well a long time ago, and I'm working to support her services all across North Yorkshire, and her services run from kind of Middlesbrough all the way down to Leeds, and they do things like autism assessment, ADHD, podiatry, psychology, a whole range of fantastic services, and it's really full on. And you have to switch your mindset between different problems all the time. So for example, if you're dealing with a dental team, you've got a certain set of personalities and a certain set of characteristics, and then you switch to the speech and language therapy team, and that's a completely different set of circumstances, and you're constantly switching. And it's really rewarding, really interesting, really fast paced, and you're doing something that really matters to people. It really makes a difference. And as someone who's kind of changed careers 2 or 3 times, I definitely think one thing I have learned about myself is that I'm really driven by public service. Doing things that are helpful to people is really important to me. And that's something I've learned through hard experience and through taking jobs that haven't offered me that and not really enjoying them and needing to switch. So I hope that's given you a good overview about what I'm doing now and what I've been doing since March of last year.
Yeah, I think that really has. I think Marika and I both unmuted very quickly to ask a few questions as well. I wanted to make the point that switching careers, I think for young people now, the idea that you'd have one career for your whole working life is obviously something that they appreciate is not going to happen. But making that switching career can be quite a tricky thing. And also what you said around knowing what you don't want to do by experiencing it is a really important career experience as well. Was it difficult kind of choosing to switch? Or is that something you find kind of naturally? Do you like a change?
I do like a change, but it's absolutely terrifying. I found it very difficult. I found it overwhelming at times. I really struggled at times. I had very low moments where I thought, oh, do you know what? I'm no good at anything here. But and I've had failures, a lot of failures. And the failures have taught me things. The failures have taught me that what's really important to me is to be working in a team where I can be a little bit of myself, I can inject a little bit of personality, where I feel like I'm helping people. And I've only learned that by working in places where I couldn't do that and realizing the impact that it had on me. So I'm not going to sit here and say that you'll fall into the perfect career and everything will be easy. It's just not the case. It will be hard, and you will be down on yourself, and you will face struggles, and you will go through times when you know what you're doing isn't right for you. You feel like you can't find the thing that is. And I've definitely had those moments. I've definitely had them. Even within a career I love, I loved teaching, and I still do. But I've worked in some schools where I felt like they got me, and I made a contribution, and I made a difference. And I've worked in other schools where I didn't feel like that at all, and it was horrible. It was really horrible. So even within a career that you love, you can have those times where the thing that you're doing just isn't right for you, and that's okay, and that's normal, and you are going to experience that. And the thing to remember is you've just got to keep plugging through. You ask for help, don't be afraid to change, and just keep plugging through is what I would say when it's time to make that change, and it will be. I think it's very rare that people go to one career and stick in it out. And even within one career, there's so many different aspects to that career. If you take one that I think a lot of people will be familiar with, which is teaching, there's so many different strands to being a teacher. You can change the type of school that you work in, you can change the setting, you can change the age group, and all of that has a massive impact. So even if you stay within one career, there's lots of different strands to that career that you could explore. So I hope that answered the question.
No, absolutely. And earlier today we had Hannah, who works for Barclays. She started as a cashier in a different bank, moved into different roles. She now heads up diversity and inclusion and people development. And it's interesting just exploring those roles you didn't necessarily know existed. I mean, when people think about the NHS, they probably think about their frontline workers initially, but all of the stuff going on behind the scenes, like yourself, and obviously you went into it at quite a time to sort of be on the steepest learning curve I can possibly imagine. But all of those roles behind the scenes that people don't really know need their skill set as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that's important to remember about the NHS is the NHS is very used to trainees and is very good at dealing with them. And they have trainees around them and among them all the time. So I had a fantastic support network who knew what to expect. And I think when you are looking to change careers, it is a two-way process. You need that support from the people that you're going to, as well as they need your hard work and commitment. It has to be a two-way process. And I think when you find a workplace that gives you that two-way process, you feel it. You really feel it, and it's really great.
One thing I wanted to pick up, sorry, Ben, I just wanted to pick up on that. I love the fact of you said that even within this journey, you've had failure, which is something we've heard about earlier today, and that it's not a bad thing to fail. And within this, you can bring like your real self to work and just be you. And again, that's something that we've heard earlier on today. What I wanted to know is every time you switched, did you kind of know the transferable skills that you were bringing to that next role? Like, were there links, say, from teaching to doing what you're doing now?
Hello, am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
There we go. Sorry, Marika. So I think in hindsight, I did. In hindsight, I knew those skills. At the time, I don't know whether imposter syndrome is a concept that people are familiar with, but imposter syndrome is the idea that you're in this job and you feel like you don't understand why, and people are asking you for help with things and asking you like things, and you think, well, I'm not the right person. I'm not good enough for this. I'm not that person. And I think when you change careers, imposter syndrome is a real thing. And even when you start a brand new career, you will feel like an imposter, and that's normal. And I think it's only in hindsight that I can look back and reflect and identify the skills that either made me a success or in some cases didn't make me a success. And that's the learning that I took forward with me. I think one of the reasons I did relatively well at the start of this new career is that I'd had 2 failures before then that actually taught me a lot, and that I really was conscious of and I really reflected on and thought carefully about. And I took those lessons with me into this new job. So I think for me personally, I don't always realise the soft skills I've got until a bit later. But with that said, I do spend a lot of time reflecting and thinking about my behaviours and thinking about what I contribute before I start something new. So that's the process that works for me. But I'm sure if you spoke to some of my other colleagues on this scheme, and one of the things the scheme does is really support you in being reflective and give you the tools to be reflective, I think they'd have very different methods of dealing with that, but would come out with the same outcome. And I think in terms of realizing what your soft skills are, it's not necessarily how you realize what they are, as long as you do. So it's a really good question.
Thank you, Matt. I think I just latch onto the skills bit actually. The slides we've referred to, I'll jump around a little bit. Because we asked you the question kind of ahead of this of like what knowledge and skills are essential for your role or industry. So I know you put a few down, but I wonder if those, so first of all, you might want to talk about those and where they fit in with your role. But I'll be also interested to know kind of, are those skills you knew you had before or whether they're ones you developed on the way?
I think it's interesting in that I think when it comes to things like, have I gone? No, I'm still going. When it comes to things like empathy, I don't think I always mean empathy in the way that people think that I mean. So I think empathy is important in that you need to be able to understand where people are coming from. You need to appreciate their struggles and who they are as people for you to work with them correctly. But it doesn't mean that you always have to agree with them. And it doesn't mean that you always have to be nicey and people see empathy and they think it's all calm and let's make a cup of tea and you can understand a person's perspective but passionately disagree with them and not go along with them. And as long as you've got a very good reason why and you can communicate that reason in a way that because of your empathy with them, it enables them to understand where you're coming from. I think that's what I mean with empathy. I think empathy can be a very powerful tool for disagreement. Organisation, I think, to answer your question a little bit more, organisation, empathy and strong personal values is definitely, I think, two things that I developed while teaching. I think being a teacher really developed those two things in me. Organisation is something that I did not have. I was not an organised person, and I became an organised person because when I wasn't organised, my life was more stressful and unpleasant. And I listen to a lot of random podcasts, and I'm not endorsing anything here, but there's a great comment from a guy called Jocko Willing, and he says that discipline brings freedom. And I've definitely learned that throughout my working career. When I'm more disciplined and more organised, I actually have more freedom to do the things that I want to do because I'm not stressing out. So I'm doing my master's alongside the course at the moment. And when I'm really disciplined and I do 2 or 3 hours a week, I get my things finished 2 or 3 weeks early, which actually gives me a 2 or 3 week complete and utter brain break that if I weren't organised, I wouldn't have. And I wouldn't do the work, but it would just be always biting away at the back of my head, and I'd feel more and more stressed about it. Whereas if I actually just do it 2 or 3 hours a week, that discipline, it's difficult at the time, but it's easier in the long run. And so that's what I've learned about organisation. And I think when it comes to values, I think your values are the things that should underpin everything that you do. And every time you make a decision, it should be based upon your values. And I think your values should be a lot harder to change than anything else about you. That's not to say that your values shouldn't change, because mine definitely have over the years. But I think having a strong set of personal values and joining an organisation and a career and behaving in a way that you're proud of, or that you can at least explain and defend, it is really important if you're going to get satisfaction out of your career. So I think these three things are very important for the industries that I've had, but I think the industries that I've been drawn to are kind of industries that do require a little bit more empathy, and they are more caring professions. The NHS and teaching are the two ones that I'm really drawn towards. So I think those skills are very personal to me and relatively specific to the type of industries that I ended up in.
I think that's really important. I mean, the organisation piece I think is really interesting in that you said you weren't necessarily an organised person, but you've seen a real important role for it.
I was awful. It was horrendous, and I'm not anymore, and it makes my life easier.
Because I think that's an important message for the young people watching to take away is you're like, oh, I'm not organised, but there is maybe a place for it, and it is something you can develop and work at as well. You don't have to be stuck with your exact personality traits throughout the whole of your life.
I think if you're the same person at 16 as you are at 30 or 25, you have to take a long, hard look at yourself. And I know that I'm a very different person now than I was then. I think if I met 16-year-old me or even 25-year-old me, I wouldn't like myself very much.
There's a lot to be said for that change, isn't there? I mean, I look very similar to how I did at about 20, which is depressing. But I hope I've learned a lot in that time. I was really interested if we talk. Obviously, it may not be that the graduate scheme into the NHS is where every single student watching is going to go. But that bit you said about having sort of that empathy, that willingness to understand other people's situations, but like you say, not always to agree with them, but to sort of understand where they're coming from in that discussion, and strong personal values. I imagine that will be a few young people with similar feelings of like, oh no, actually, I feel quite strongly about certain things, and I do like to understand people's points of view. I think what you've said there is that the NHS teaching the public sector roles are something that allow maybe a bit more of that to come out.
I think any kind of caring profession type role, or a profession where you're dealing with people who, as a teacher, you're dealing with people who need guidance and support, and you can have a real influence on helping them develop and grow. And in the NHS, what for me is a Monday could be for someone I'm speaking to the worst day of their life. And you've got to remember that in the way that you deal with people. And even if you don't agree with what they're saying and how they're saying it, you have to understand that this is them on the worst day of their life, and you have to be appreciative of that. And that's true of whatever role you're in. Even in my role where I'm dealing with people who might be talking to me to speak about something that happened 3 months ago, that they're talking about something that to them was horrendous and awful. And I think you really have to empathise with that and understand that, and almost advocate for them, even if you don't always necessarily see where they're coming from. You have to advocate for them, and I think empathy is a really important skill. I think it's more important in something like teaching or the NHS, but I think it's a skill that will benefit you in whatever industry and whatever role you're in, and in your personal life as well.
I think advocacy is really important. Like you said about you doubted some of your skill sets, and I still
do. I doubt them every day, and for me that's a tool that helps me get better at them, because I think if I ever get to the point where I feel like I've nailed something, I'm wrong and I need to change it up.
I noticed you also mentioned a manager or someone that you're working under at the moment that has had a sort of positive influence as well, and I can only assume that means that they're there being your critical friend, building you up when you need to, and pointing out things that you want to work on as well. So that importance of having the right people around you as well.
It's really vital, and I think me and Sarah are quite different in the way that we do things and the way that we approach things, but I really appreciate that difference in her, and I hope she appreciates it in me, and I think that means that when we're dealing with problems, I think we tend to come to a better solution because we both have slightly different viewpoints on it, and I think finding mentors, finding people that you can look up to is really important. I mean, I remember when I was teaching and I was learning to teach, and I went to speak to a teacher and said, "Oh, I think I'd really like to teach like you," and he said, "No, you can't be me. You can't be me. You need to be you. Take the bits from me that you like and run them through your filter, but never try and be a mentor. Just take the bits that you like and change them and fit them in for your personality." And I think one of the most powerful pieces of advice I think I'd give to anyone looking at careers is, once you get there, look for a mentor, but look carefully, because there's good mentors and there's bad mentors, and that's a lesson for you to learn as well. Unfortunately, I wish I could give you the advice to help you work out the difference, but I think experience is the greatest teacher there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, maybe unfortunately one of those ones where sometimes you know what you're not looking for in the future because of experience.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end of our slot with you, Matt. So I wanted to come back to one more question, if I may, which is about your kind of proudest professional moment so far. And I think you kind of picked out two, though feel free to change them now.
No.
But what are your proudest professional achievements to date? Bearing in mind what you've been through over the last year and a half, I think these are significant ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think my work through the pandemic in general, I've been really proud of, and I would never hold my hand up and say that I was a key person in any of the work that I did. But I like to think that I made the key people's lives a little bit easier and helped us get the right outcomes wherever we could, and I think we did the best that we could, and I'm proud of that. I think there was one point where I'd been asked if we could get some more ventilators and machines, and I just kept chipping away at the problem until I found myself on the phone to the cabinet office, and our chief operating officer was he found that quite hilarious. He just set me up with the task, and 4 hours later I was on the phone to the cabinet office demanding these ventilators. So I think I was really proud of that. And my work since joining the NHS, there's so many individual things that stick with me that it'd be hard to go into. And I think when I was teaching, I taught in one of the most incredible schools I've ever worked in. I'd like to give it a shout out to Cardwell Primary School in Woolwich. Unbelievable school, unbelievable community, unbelievable parents and children, and the staff were just fantastic, and facing so many challenges, and working with families there and children that were infected directly by the terror attacks and by some of the criminal gangs and organisations in that area, and they were just so inspirational, and children there who would get up and come into school every day and would just blow you away by what they were going through and how they reacted to it, and the staff as well. And I think I'm really proud of the work that I did there, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but I think when I said that I don't think I'd like myself at 25 compared to what I am now, and I think Cardwell's got a big part to play in making me a better person, not just age, but the kind of experiences that I had there and the empathy that they helped me develop. And I know it sounds like a cliche to say, "Oh, the kids taught me more than I taught them," and that's not true. I was a really good teacher, but I do think personally they gave me a lot, and I went off a bit of a tangent there, Ben, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, but tangents are good. I also think a reminder to the young people watching about the impact they have on the teachers and people that they meet. I don't know that they always realise they have an impact positively on us. And there are definitely students from my own teaching career that I remember very, very fondly. And
They stick with you.
Absolutely. Whether they remember me, I'll leave them to decide. But
Yeah.
but that's awesome. We hopefully, if anyone's got any questions for Matt, then please do drop them in. Obviously, really, really fascinating work that Matt's been able to do most recently, and obviously before that as well. So any questions, we can post those to Matt. If Matt's able to, he might be able to join back for the Q&A towards the end of the session, obviously sort of work allowing. But I'll just, Matt, say a huge thank you for your time today so far. It's been really interesting.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Cool. Thank you to Matt. So moving on from Matt's really interesting talk, we're now going to bring in our next guest. So I'd like to welcome Kadeen. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Hi, good afternoon. Hope everyone's well.
Yeah, really good. Thank you. So without further ado, I'll just allow you to introduce yourself and what you currently do, and then we'll get into some of the journey behind that, if that's okay.
No problem. Well, I'm Kadeen. I am a digital marketing lead for social media at a company called Science Magic Inc. So in terms of my role and what I do currently, I have a very senior role in my job. So I basically help my team to basically create and plan social media strategies for some of our clients and their campaigns. So basically what that entails is I make a plan of, depending on what our client wants or needs, a plan of how they can use social media to raise awareness for their brand or their product or a launch. We do also work with public figures, so famous people. So that could be about promoting whatever they're working on or just building their profile on social media, deciding what platforms our clients should use. So should they use TikTok? Are they too young for TikTok? Are they too old for TikTok? Should they use Facebook, Instagram, etc., etc.? Then what types of content should they post? Obviously, social media is just full of different content. So what types of content will attract their audience that they're trying to target? And that will help to convert into engagement. So likes, comments, shares, views, and then how we can create that content. So what ideas can we brainstorm to make creative content that's specific for social media and specific for a platform? So it's specific for Twitter, or is it specific for YouTube? And basically, it's just about raising awareness for our clients on social media. Another part of my role is also project management. So I basically tell people what to do and to make sure that they do things on time according to the timeline that I have created, making sure that the budgets are kept within a certain cost. So each project has a amount of money that we're allowed to spend in terms of the amount of hours that each individual person spends working on it, as well as paying for content to be made or paid advertising on social media. And then lastly, one of my other tasks that I do in my job is social media listening. So social media listening is basically analyzing a particular topic or a person or a brand on social media and having a look at all of the different conversations that have been made online about that particular thing. So for example, I'm going to say England football team. I can look and see all of the millions of conversations that are happening around the world around the England football team and dive in deeper and check if there's particular conversations about each football player or other teams that they're playing against. So that's another major part of the role that I do currently. So it's all very varied. It's very, very busy. No day is the same at all.
I was just about to say that is a lot of work that you have going on.
It is.
Although you say no day is the same, what does a general day look like for you?
A general day for me is checking my emails before I actually get out of bed to make sure there's been nothing that's happened on social media overnight, because obviously social media, as you know, is 24/7. So I've got clients that are in the States. I've got clients that are in other areas of Europe. We might be working on a project that's happening in South Africa, and one of my teams might be over there. So I just have to make sure before I get out of bed that nothing urgent has happened overnight that I have to literally be hands-on for straight away before I even brush my teeth, because that does happen sometimes. So I do that first, and then I'll read my emails. I normally have a look at to see if there's any kind of news that's happened in the social media world. So as I'm sure you all know, there's always a new update that's happening to a platform, always. So Instagram is always bringing out something new, TikTok always doing something new. So I kind of have to stay up to date as to what's happening on each social media platform, so that I can then advise my clients, oh, you should try this new thing that's happening, or maybe you shouldn't try it actually because it's not for you. So that's what my morning's consisting of. Then I'm in loads of meetings throughout the day, and those meetings are client meetings where I'll either be talking to our clients about a strategy that we've created, or brainstorming ideas with my team. And then there's a lot of admin that I have to do within my role, just to make sure that my team is functioning properly. So as well as that, as well as also just looking through Instagram, I spend a lot of my time on Instagram just looking at what other people are doing on Instagram. So other brands that might be competitors to a client that I have, or just looking at influencers to see what they're doing and how they're posting. So a lot of my time is spent mainly on Instagram, just browsing through every couple of hours just to see, as I said, what people are posting, what's out there. And I also get a lot of my news from social media. I don't actually watch the news anymore. I get all of my news from probably Instagram and Twitter. So that's kind of what a lot of my day is made up of, just browsing a lot of stuff. And then there'll be days where I'm literally back to back on client calls. So anything from telling someone how to pose, to telling someone what hashtags to use, to telling someone off for posting something that they shouldn't have posted. So it really, really varies.
As such a varied role. And I think really interesting that I think your role comes under one of those roles that hasn't existed for a huge amount of time. And obviously it's just changing minute by minute, if not quicker.
Yeah, definitely.
So for the young people watching who are thinking, like, that sounds interesting to me, how do I get into this? Are there certain qualifications? Or if they're just an avid social media follower and interactor, is that enough? So I'd be really interested to know kind of where you're looking for people to work with you. What do you look for? What's the route?
So you don't have to have any qualifications at all to do what I do. So when I started in my career, I did have a degree, but my degree didn't help me at all, even though it was in a similar field to social media marketing. So I would say the main thing I would say is that you are very, very interested in social media. You're an avid user. You actually use social media yourself, and you actually like posting. So that's like the main way that I would say you could get into social media, just actually posting in your account and using all of the different functionalities and tools that each platform offers. So obviously on Instagram, you've got Instagram stories, you've got IGTV, you've got feed posts, you've got reels, and now they're bringing in audio, which I suppose by the end of the year, it will be everybody in the world be able to have an audio functionality. So I would just say, if you are interested in working in social media marketing, just make sure that you are on the social media platforms. And you don't have to be on all of the social media platforms. It's just whatever platform you find interesting and what you feel comfortable using, and then taking that and just making as much content as you can possibly. It's also about understanding how the platforms work. And obviously, a lot of the people that will follow you are your friends, but what content do your friends love to engage with? What content makes your friends like leave comments, likes, or share it in their DMs? That's like the key thing to know. Once you've kind of figured that out, it will then help you in terms of when you have work experience or you get a job, you'll have a bit more knowledge to understand, okay, so I know how my social media works. Let me apply some of that knowledge that I have to maybe a client that I'm going to work on. And I will say, I'm not old, but in social media terms, I am old. I'm 34 years old, but in social media terms, I'm old. I started working in social media about 14 years ago, where there was only MySpace, Bebo, High Five. Some of these I know you kids are like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's how old I am in social media terms, but I'm not old in real life.
Yeah, I mean, you're making some of us feel slightly older as well. I mean, it's definitely an area that I work in digital and technology a lot. We do a lot of training, but social media is something that at times does make me feel a lot older than I think I am.
Yeah.
When you kind of catches you out with all the new features, that's really interesting though to kind of understand how you get into it, because I think for yourself you said you've got a degree.
Yeah,
but
I have a degree.
That wasn't necessity.
I definitely did not need a degree to start my career off.
That's so fascinating.
Can
Marika?
you, I was going to say, can you just talk a little bit about any kind of either clients that you've worked with, if you're allowed to, or kind of big campaigns or projects that you've worked on, just so we can kind of get a flavour of how your job manifests? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first started in digital marketing, I first started off working with the music artist Kano, which a few of you out there might be familiar with. It was a time when he left his record label and decided to go independent. So he released an album by himself, and I worked with his head of marketing on a campaign specifically for his album called 140 Grime Street as a digital marketing assistant. So at the time I was also a music journalist, which tied in nicely. So I basically built an email campaign around that. We had a street team. I kind of told him what things to post on his social media. So at the time there was only Facebook, and Facebook looked completely different to how it looks now. So think of Facebook with everything stripped back from it as you currently know it, and just think of just a page with just posts. And that was a Facebook page for a celebrity at that time. So that was my first foray into digital marketing. And then once that project was over, because it was just for a project, I then got a job when I graduated as a digital liaison officer. So basically my role was to manage the social media channels for some of our clients. So some of our clients were Belvedere Vodka, Amazon, Krug, Champagne. There's a lot of kind of luxury clients that I worked with. And I also worked with a lot of influencers. So it was just about getting influencers to post things on their blogs about clients that I was working with. So at the time, influencers didn't really use social media as much as they do now. A lot of their kind of work was placed on blogs and their websites. So they'd probably paraphrase something that I sent to them, or if I invited them to an event, they then post about how the event was, what they liked and what they did. And then in my current role, I've been there for the past 7 years. I started there as a social media junior account manager. So that was me mainly writing copy and creating content for some of our clients, such as Bell Staff, which is a brand that David Beckham used to be the face of, Keds trainers or Keds plimsolls, Versace. Trying to think of some other brands that you guys might know.
Wait,
Sainsbury's.
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question? You said writing copy. What do you mean by that?
So writing copy is just basically, so you'll have a video or an image, and to post it on social media, it needs to have a caption. So you need to write a caption that's related to either the image or the video. So depending on what it is, I draft copy for Instagram, for Twitter, for Facebook, or for YouTube, or for LinkedIn. Most of the copy changes per channel, just because, as I said before, you kind of engage with each different social media platform a bit differently than others. And obviously with Twitter, you have a character limit in terms of how many different letters or symbols you can use. So drafting copy means, basically just making sure that you've got a caption that is relevant to the picture or to the video that you may be posting. And then from doing that, I became a account manager. So I did the same thing again. including a lot of reporting. So with social media, you have to basically report on either a weekly or monthly basis, just to make sure that you're not losing any engagement on your channels for your clients, to make sure that your follower base is growing. So obviously you want to make sure that you have a good amount of followers joining each month on your account. And then from there, I then became a digital director. My job title just changed recently, but it's the same role, where I now manage a team and guide them and help them to kind of execute all the work that I used to do before.
I think it's really fascinating, the writing the copy, in that if you think of, at school, you obviously you're asked to do lots of different writing ones and think about the audience. I kind of feel like that writing is on a whole new level of, there's the audience and there's the platform, and I presume that you kind of monitor what you've previously put out, see what really hit the mark,
Yeah,
and then kind of
exactly that.
adapt that as you go.
Exactly that. It can be quite fun. Sometimes it can be quite challenging, because you do get to work on clients that you might be a fan of yourself, or like you're really interested in. And then there are some days where you're working on something that you might have no interest in whatsoever at all, but you have to find a way to be able to write that copy to still engage with the people that like that brand.
It strikes me that you have an amazing dedication to what you do, in terms of, like you said, getting up in the morning and sort of engaging what's going on. It seems very fast paced, very changeable. You must be pretty happy to adapt to change all the time.
Yeah, you have to be. It's very fast paced. There's always something new to learn, which I think is my most favorite thing about my job. As I said, every day isn't the same, but there's always something new to learn. So as I said, I've been working in social media for 14 years, but there is still something to learn every week, literally. So you never, ever, ever, ever stop working and learning.
That's such a really good message about that as well.
Yeah. I just want to ask one quick question, if I may.
Sure.
As a young person, maybe who wants to get into your role, do you think it's important to think about what they're putting on their own social medias?
I will say that is important, especially when you will be applying for work experience or jobs. Especially if you're going to work in social media, the first thing they're going to look at is your social media profile, just to make sure that, one, you kind of understand what you're getting yourself into in terms of, do you know how social media works? Are you on Instagram? Are you on TikTok? And then they'll check to see, oh, does this person know how to use the platform? So I would say it is, be cautious about what you post sometimes, or on Instagram stories, just use the friends, close friends functionality. So therefore it's only your friends that can see what you're getting up to on the weekends, as I do, because obviously all of my clients follow me, so they don't need to see what I do on the weekends. So I would say, yeah, just be a bit cautious as to what you do post, because as I'm sure a lot of you may have seen over the past 2 to 3 years, this thing called cancel culture, where somebody posts something and somebody digs it up. It could have been 15 years ago. If you haven't deleted it, it can be found, and they try and use that negatively against you. Most of the time it's okay, because, you grow as a person. So you might have different beliefs at the age of 15, but as a 25-year-old, your beliefs may change completely. But it is really just good to just double check that, especially when you're applying for jobs or for work experience, that there isn't anything that you've posted in the past year or two that might be detrimental to your application process. So anything that might be super negative, just double check. And if you feel that something might be taken the wrong way, I would just suggest that you delete it.
Sage advice for young people starting off on that journey as well. There's loads of questions we could ask, but we're going to need to move on to our next speaker. Katie, it's been really fascinating to hear from you.
No problem.
And I think continuing over the days to provide some really interesting insights into jobs that maybe some students and young people aren't aware exist, and that kind of matched up with things that they're really passionate about. So it's just a huge pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Awesome. That was really interesting, and I know that my own relationship with social media, and it goes back and forth. So I need to have another look at a few things. Awesome. Next up, we have Rhiannon. So I'm going to welcome Rhiannon into our careers fair today. Hi there, Rhiannon. How are you doing?
Hi there. I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. So, as I've done with previous guests, I'll let you introduce yourself, and we'll just bring in your slides as well.
Okay,
and then I'll let you talk about who you are and what you do.
Okay, so as you said, my name's Rhiannon. I work at London's Air Ambulance charity, and I guess following a theme, I probably do a job that you wouldn't expect someone to do at the Air Ambulance. I'm not a medic, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a paramedic, I'm not a pilot. I work in our charity team. My role is learning and outreach manager. So my job is to lead on our schools engagement. So going out to primary and secondary schools and youth groups to talk to young people about the work that my amazing colleagues who are medically trained get to do every day. So it's a really, I love what I do, which is partly why I'm here today, I guess. I just have the absolute pleasure of talking to as many young people as I can about how fabulous the air ambulance service is in London and across the country. There are a number of air ambulances in every local community has its own one. And I think there's a really important message that those are all charities, which a lot of people don't realise. So that's a big part of my role, is to spread the word for that.
Yeah, I think now I reflect on it, I think I probably assumed they came as part and parcel of the ambulances and all the other things that are provided. So this is entirely based on donations then?
So we get small amounts of funding from other places, but certainly in London, 70% of the costs of running the service is made up from donations from individuals or from larger corporations or from trusts and foundations. So yeah, it's a big piece of work there around fundraising for all charities, I suppose.
So is your typical, let's caveat all of this with obviously the pandemic going on, but would your typical day have been mostly spent in schools then and trying to talk and engage with young people?
Yes. Yeah. So before last year, I spent a lot of my time traveling around London, visiting different schools, giving talks in assemblies, running workshops, just generally talking to young people. Or I would spend kind of evenings going to Cubs groups, brownies, guides, scouts, that kind of thing. So yeah, lots of running around the place is what I used to do. Now I spend a lot of time in front of my laptop talking to people like this, which I've embraced, but I would much rather be with you face to face.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the careers fair last year was based on the inability of students to get out and do what they would normally do with work experience, and we're still kind of partially in that situation. Yeah. So are you starting to get out and about again, potentially? Or
yes. So this last half term, I've been lucky enough to get back into some schools in real life, which has been delightful. But it's been, like you say, it's a bit of a mix still. So I'm doing some stuff online and some stuff in the virtual world. But it's about taking the opportunities where I can, I think, making the most of what is possible at the moment.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we can talk about your role, but obviously there might also be some young people really interested in the wider roles within the air ambulance. So
of course,
if we talk about your training and journey into it, but then also maybe kind of some of the other roles as well, we'll probably get into.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess kind of same as Kadeen was saying, there's no kind of obvious training that I can point at to say this is what you need to do to do the job that I do. I've worked in lots of other organisations doing similar things before, and I think that's what's brought me to the role that I do now. I have done a bit of training in science communication since I've worked at the air ambulance, because there's a lot of information and training around that, about how you communicate and what are the most effective ways to communicate sometimes quite technical things to a broad audience. But that's, I suppose, my role now, probably I'm here because of places that I've been before, I think. It's fair to say. And then if I want to talk about my colleagues who work in the kind of the operational side, the team who go out and help people at the roadside when they've had serious accidents. So everyone in our team who's medically trained is highly skilled, highly experienced. I mean, these are not first jobbers by any means. These are really highly experienced paramedics who've had a lot of years of training on the ground in the ambulance service, who will then transfer across to work at the air ambulance. The same with the doctors. They will be skilled consultants or registrars, usually in surgery, or anaesthetics tend to be the routes that they come through. So, and same with our pilots. They are highly skilled, highly trained, highly experienced before they come to work for us, because the incidents that the air ambulance team go to are the most serious accidents where people are the most seriously injured. So you want the best people kind of arriving at the scene. That's who we want in our team, and that's absolutely who we have in London.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what the situations are that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
So going back into your own experience, you talked about some of the places you've been before and how that kind of informed what you do now.
Yeah.
I think it'd be also really interesting to understand like the advocating for a charity that you do, kind of that route as well. It'd be really interesting to explore as well.
Yeah, so I guess just to touch on the slide that's showing there, in my preparations for talking to you today, I actually went back and counted how many places I've worked, because I'd forgotten. Turns out it's 14, which sounds like quite a lot. But I think what might sound unusual to someone of my age is probably less unusual for the young people maybe listening now, that this might become a more normal kind of route through working. I think, yeah, in terms of what I do, I'm absolutely an advocate for the charity that I work for. And I would say that's a really important part of the role that I do. And anyone wanting to do this kind of a role, if you don't passionately believe that the organisation that you are the face of and the voice of, if you can't believe in that, then you're kind of in the wrong job, I would say. I find it really easy to be enthusiastic and passionate about what my colleagues do, because I know that they do a fantastic job, and I know that they save people's lives every day. And for me, that's a given. And so it's very easy to then talk enthusiastically about it to groups of people. So I would say any young people thinking about wanting to do this, think about the things that matter to you, and seek out the organisations that are working in that space and doing important work in that space, and get involved with them now. Find out if you can volunteer for them. Find out if you can fundraise for them. Get involved now, because then when you might apply for a role with them in 5 or 10 years' time, if you're able to say, do you know what, I've been supporting you for this much time, I really believe in what you do because of all these reasons, it makes you a much more interesting applicant, I would say, for the role, because you're going to stand out if you can show that you genuinely, passionately believe in that cause.
So, Marika, sorry.
Oh, no. I didn't have anything to say. All I just want to say is that I love your kind of previous work experience kind of thing. It kind of goes like that and like that and like that.
It's absolutely not, it's definitely not linear.
No, I love that.
Oh, thank you. But I think it's definitely made me what I am today. And I think back to what Matt was saying earlier, that I've taken things from all the jobs that I've worked in and all the people that I've worked with, and that's built me into the person that I am now. And absolutely, I'm a different person now from when I graduated and I had my first job. If I look back at that person, that's not the person I am today. But I've brought some people with me along the way, and all the different places that I've worked, I'm still in contact with someone, at least one person from everywhere that I've worked with before. And I think I've put it in a slide later, but in terms of lessons I've learned, I think it's how important those contacts can be, even when you don't work together anymore, how important those people can be for you.
Well, it's what we rely on, to gathering together an amazing set of people for these type of events as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
I also noticed there's obviously a theme of working with young people, the training,
the
career aspect throughout all of that. And would you say that like it's just been a case of applying that to different situations, and like you say, you have now been able to sort of take all of that expertise with that and advocate for a charity that you're really passionate about?
Yeah, I think so. And I think for me, I never, well, it's pretty obvious, I never had a grand plan. That's why it's quite so wiggly. But I've always applied for jobs that I thought would be interesting to me, rather than thinking, my next step needs to be this kind of a role in this kind of an organization. I've always just looked around and thought, oh, wow, that sounds like an amazingly interesting role or an amazing, interesting organization. And I've kind of followed my gut in that way, because for me, it's really important to enjoy what I do. And again, reflecting back on what things that Matt was saying, you know, there've been some jobs that on reflection probably weren't a great move for me, but I still learned something while I was there, and I met some amazing people. And I moved on and I took that with me to my next place. And then you learn the things that you don't want in your next role as well. And I think it's really important to capture those things as well as the things you love, is to think about what you really not want in a job. And what's the way you don't want to be managed, or the way that you don't want to have to work, I suppose. And you only learn that by doing it sometimes.
Yeah, I think across the last year and a half, a lot of us have learned that we'd like to get out of the house.
I really like to get out of the
job.
house. Yeah, absolutely.
Though equally, I obviously appreciate there have been people that haven't been able to, that have been working very hard out of their houses the whole time.
That's very true. That's very true.
That might have appreciated a bit of time that I've had as well. So
Yeah,
swings and roundabouts.
Absolutely. And I would say a lot of my colleagues didn't have the luxury of staying at home. So, you know, our service had to continue through the whole time, because those accidents were still happening, and our team still needed to be available 24/7. And they did that absolutely brilliantly.
No doubt.
What's one of the things you wish you knew as a teenager that you didn't know then that you do know now?
Oh, I love that question. I think something I kind of touched on already is that how important the people you meet along the way will be, and how many of those people will stay with you across the years. So I guess, yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to say. It's about that. You don't realize it at the time, but what you're doing is you're building these contacts, you're building your network, you're building the people who are around you. And who are the people who, when you're having a bad day, or you're thinking, oh, I really need to find a new job, who are you going to talk to about that? Who's going to help you to navigate, and who's going to have the kind of honest conversations with you as well? And again, back to something Matt was saying about finding mentors and people who you trust, who will be honest with you and tell you, actually, do you know what? When you do that, it's quite annoying. Or, you know, you need to have people who can tell you that and not pretend that everything's rosy when maybe it's not. And having those people, finding those people, and having the trust that when they tell you things, they probably got a point, and taking the time to listen, I think is really important. I think a lot of the jobs that I've ended up getting, I only knew that job existed because someone in my network of contacts flagged it up to me. And I try and do the same for other people now. So I have an interest in jobs and careers, and so I'm on a lot of different kind of jobs boards and mailing lists. And I spend a lot of time, you know, pinging emails to people going, have you seen this job? Have you seen this job? Not because I want to do it, but because I think it might be a good fit for them. And people have done that for me in the past. And I think that's a really useful thing, because you can't be on top of everything. You can't see every single notification about every single job in every single organization, but having those other people looking out for you, and having people who you trust, if you're thinking about, it's time for me to move on, to let those people know that, so that they can keep a lookout for you and send you things that might be interesting. I think that's been super helpful for me anyway.
I think there are also, obviously, you know, some people rate themselves very highly and other people are a bit more cautious about putting themselves out there.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
someone else that you know and trust telling you, you'd be really good at this, I think is often the nudge that a lot of people need to go, I didn't think I was, but now you've said it, that can be the catalyst. So I think for everyone, that building a network has come up a few times, around surrounding yourself with people that are going to ask you honest, you know, give you honest feedback, but also have got your back and build you up is a really important one.
Absolutely.
I mean, you talked about the team, and I know Google, we had a couple of Googlers on this morning.
Okay.
Google internally sort of analysed their teams and found the most effective teams were the ones that had the highest amount of psychological safety. So they felt comfortable to fail, get it wrong, and try stuff out as a team, which sounds similar to kind of what you were saying about the teams that you've worked with as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. There's lots and lots of questions that we want to ask, but if I leave you to have the last word in terms of any, what's your sort of proudest professional moment as you reflect on your career so far?
Oh, you see, I'm not good at this stuff, but I think the one that I pulled out for you was that. So I started working at the air ambulance in October 2017, and since then we have engaged with over 17,000 young people all across London, which I think is pretty cool that we've done that, and onwards and upwards from there, I suppose. But I think that when I figured that out, that it did make me stop and think, wow, I'm actually I'm doing something pretty cool here, doing something pretty exciting, and that's definitely going to have an impact. And that's made me smile, cheered my day.
Absolutely. Obviously, we'll have schools watching right now and sort of picking this up afterwards. And I know we've got a few links and things that we can send out to them to allow them to engage with you and obviously sort of get that connection with you as well. So we'll put those in the comments and that will be sent out afterwards.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, always happy to visit a London school.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't arrive in an air ambulance, do you?
Sadly not allowed. No, it's kind of busy, sadly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be slightly irresponsible, wouldn't it?
It would be a little bit irresponsible. It costs quite a lot of money to put that helicopter in the sky. Yeah, sadly I don't get to fly around in it. But one day. Thank
you so much for your time. Really interesting to know about these roles around charities. So obviously for a lot of young people who will have charities close to their heart, engaging with them, finding out what kind of they can do, whether it's voluntary or ultimately a role within the organisation. I think there's lots to explore.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for putting this on. Thanks for giving us the platform.
Pleasure. Lawrence has been working his socks off, and I've been somewhere around as well. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, so next up we have Jason. So going to bring Jason into the conversation. I think Jason's on his travels as well, so might be connecting from all over the place. Pardon me, sorry, got a little bit waylaid into something else.
It's okay.
Cool. Welcome, Jason, if you're there. Cool.
Yeah,
hey, Ben. Hey, Marie.
Hello.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm well. I'm really well. It's been a fantastic conversation. I'm really excited to join it. So yeah.
And am I right that you're not? You've been on the move?
But I'm in London. I'm in London at the moment. We live between London and New York currently, but I'm in London. So yeah, I thought I was going to be away, but I'm in London.
Okay, cool. So what I'll do is give me a couple of seconds and I'll switch and let you introduce yourself, and we'll sort of show people who you are. But over to you, Jason. What is it that you do, and how did you get there, I suppose, is the question we're going to be asking.
Sure. My official title is Vice President of Business Strategy and Operations at the Walt Disney Company. That's that role I've been in now for, I think, 9 months, exactly a year ago, actually, last summer. I've been working for Disney for about 6 years now. And last summer, an opportunity came to help us grow one of our newer brands and franchises. So for those of you that will not be aware of this, Disney owns a load of entertainment brands beyond just the Disney ones you're aware of. So most people think of Disney, Pixar. My family still think I work in a theme park whenever I say I work for Disney, but we also own Star Wars, Marvel, ESPN, the world's biggest sports media outlet. And then in the US, we have another brand. We have several other brands. We have another brand called The Undefeated, which is a sports culture website. And we made a decision about a year ago, March 2020, that we wanted to navigate it to become a Disney-wide franchise and brand. So that means it stands up as one of our top 6 brands. And that doesn't happen overnight, as well as Marvel and Star Wars, which those brands have taken 40 and 60 years respectively to be where they are today. We also own National Geographic, which has taken 130 years, 20th Century Fox, which has been over 40 years. So my job really is to help us build the next 5 years of this brand as we build it up to become a Disney-wide brand and take it beyond its purview scope of sports. So we want to lean into everything. It's specifically focused around creators of color, so bringing in more Black content, more Black creators and Black storytellers. So my job is to lead that from a business point of view. So when we go about these endeavors, what we tend to do is we have a brilliant creative leader. If you look at Marvel, there's a gentleman called Kevin Feige, who is the creative brains behind everything we do at the MCU. But then you need a business leader to help make sure from a business point of view, you're building all the right functions and putting your money in the right places. So my job is the business side, not the creative side on the Undefeated. But I partner with my colleague who is responsible for the creative side to really make sure what she wants to achieve from the brand is the right thing for us to do from a business. So it's a varied role. I've been in it, like I said, officially for 9 months. Still learning an awful lot. One of the things I thought about when I was approached about this role is like, they said to us, we just need a creative problem solver. And I realized actually that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years of my career. I've been finding creative solutions to solving problems. So really that's what I do day in, day out for the Undefeated today as we try and grow into a Disney-wide brand.
I mean, a creative problem solver, I think we've talked a lot over the last today about transferable skills. And that sounds to me like a extremely valuable transferable skill. I mean, outside of Disney, and any organization at the moment is looking for creative problem solvers. So what has been your journey to kind of build up that ability?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in entertainment for 10 years now, 10 plus years, since leaving uni. And it's always been around finding new opportunities. So I've worked for Channel 5, ITV, Sony Music, you name it. I've worked for a lot of great entertainment entities. I've always gone into roles that required that element of someone thinking outside of the box. And often what happens, and this is the real world now, I'm going to be very honest with you, you go into big organizations like Sony and Disney, and you are often a number. We employ 250,000 people globally here at Disney, so there's a lot of people. And people tend to stick within a purview because that's what's required, and that's how you guaranteed you don't rock too many boats. I've always gone in with the emphasis of trying to impact change in a positive way. So finding solutions and sharing that with my peers or my leaders and testing things out. So for me, it's always been trying to find an element of disrupting myself and my comfort zone, and learning something new or trying something new and bringing people on that. So the one transferable skill I talk about all the time, I think it's super important, is collaboration. And Rhiannon talked about networking, which is super important. But being a good collaborator is super important too, because it brings in different stakeholders and people that understand things from a different point of view. And you can collaborate to try something new. And often that moves businesses ahead more than just doing the same old thing, right? Me sticking to my job, you sticking to yours, Marika sticking to hers. If we come together and collaborate, often there are one or two things you want to do differently, one or two things Marika wants to do differently, and likewise for me. So if we can pull some of those experiences and ideas and come out with a solution, that often is the most creative way of solving problems, to be very honest with you, to collaborate and work with others.
I mean, with the kind of film industry, maybe as part of that portfolio in mind, when you talk about thinking outside of the box, there has been a lack of ability to expose diverse talent in that area. And obviously what we've learned over the last few years is if you start to give that talent an opportunity, it's perfectly marketable and valuable. I mean, Black Panther was probably a kind of significant breakthrough when box office, and it proved a point. So with that kind of role that you're doing there around creativity, does that also help with where you say you're trying to sort of amplify Black creative voices as well? Having that diverse input, having people that are open to change, it must be really important for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's super important. I remember taking the role. One of the things I asked for was freedom to do what we needed to do. So we'll shut the door to Disney. We'll open a window every now and then for cash. We would shut the door and have the creative freedom to do what we need to do in the most authentic way. And one of the benefits, one of the great fortunes of this role is often you do get to be on a Zoom call or on a face-to-face meeting with some of these brilliant Black creators and storytellers and actors. I was on one just last week, and I won't say who it was, but he was so thrilled by the opportunity that we were going to give him the creative freedom to make this film without putting a red line through, which is often what happens in Hollywood. Recently, I think you'd have seen Will Smith being cast for Independence Day was a huge issue at Universal. Because executives said casting a Black male lead in this role will kill your international box office. And that's what we tend to think about all the time, in that there is a number to hit and we have to cast sufficiently to make sure we cover that. But what we've realized, certainly over the last couple of years, actually, there's brilliant stories to be told. And if you give them the stage and you support them in the right way, the world would get on board. And you quite rightly point out Black Panther for us. You know, we had a very modest box office. We thought it was going to hit 900 million. No one thought it would hit close to 2 billion when all was told, but we was willing to take that risk and take that bet. So yeah, absolutely. We are finding more and more that these opportunities are actually driving our business forward rather than potentially bringing our business backwards. And especially as the group of young people we're talking today, what we call Gen Zers, right, and millennials, they are often more fluid and more accepting of different cultures and experiences. So actually, if you want to be ahead in business, you need to start showcasing more diverse stories and diverse storytellers. So we kind of, you know, not to be a fanboy for Disney, we've always been at the forefront of leading that space. And when we made that decision in 2020, this was before the horrific killing of George Floyd. This was before the protests of last summer. We identified we had a really strong brand and we had a great opportunity to tell stories that no one else was telling. And that, you know, one of the benefits of being the world's biggest storytellers is we can help change that narrative a lot quicker than most people. Because if we say we're getting behind a Black-led cast, if you want it, great. If you don't want it, we're putting all of our money and resources into it. So one of the things I've learned in this role, really being more on the studio side in the last year, is what Hollywood is very much like university, right? You have freshman year, second year, and your third year. What Disney and the big studios do a lot is third year. That's the big Hollywood blockbusters, $100 million, $200 million plus, the Black Panthers, the End Games, etc. And then a lot of studios also do second year, which is like the $20 to $100 million publications, right? But no one actually does freshman year, where it's taking young talent, giving them $1 million or $2 million and helping them hone their craft, especially creators of color. And what happens is no one wants you in second year if you haven't done first year. I can't trust you with $100 million if you haven't proven yourself $1 million. So we're really getting behind that element of helping the Hollywood pipeline. And Ryan Coogler, who's someone that is now really in the third year at Disney, he's making $200-300 million movies for us. But he started off in that freshman year, $900,000 he was given by Forrest Whitaker, an actor, to create a movie called Fruitville Station. And it was his success in Fruitville Station with Michael B. Jordan that Sylvester Stallone saw his craft and called him up and said, let's do Creed together, and gave him $40 million. And only after doing Creed did we realize there's a guy called Ryan Coogler out there, and we called him and said, how about $300 million to make Black Panther? So it's really, really important. It's often these barriers to entry. So what our group is trying to do at The Undefeated is to use Disney's power and money to help bring in more creators of color through that pipeline, because you're absolutely right. You can't give someone $400 million if they've never shot a movie before. That is a risk no business should or would want to take. But what we can do is give them an opportunity to get in through that system. Often a very convoluted thing. Another thing at Disney is we won't take a script or a screenplay if you're not represented by a big Hollywood agent, right? How do you do that if you haven't made a $1 million movie? So we're really trying to do that and prove that there is a value to our industry in what we're doing over at The Undefeated.
So I suppose kind of one question that a few young people watching would have, if they're really interested in screenwriting, writing films, getting really creative, or even if they're just a creative thinker who likes to get involved with a bit of innovation and change, any tips or advice, whether that's from the Disney point of view or just your general experience for them?
Yeah, screenwriting and storytelling, I think there is no easy way of getting into it, and no routes are the same. Some people, Issa Rae, who did oh god, I forgot the name of her series, her HBO series, Insecure.
There we go.
You, Marika, would know. Insecure started off as a YouTube play, right? So no major studio would back her, so she decided to make it herself. And there's a ton of movies and shows in the UK that are doing the same thing. But then there's also the route of going through workshops, right? So there are many, many different routes, and I think it's each to their own. If you are someone who has an idea but can't articulate the story well, then go to those workshops, go to those fairs and meet other writers and partner. And again, back to what Rhiannon said about networking, find someone and partner with them to take that to somewhere. But I would say every studio is very open to stories now. And yes, there is a process, but there are a lot of aggregators, so companies that will take these stories and bring them to a Disney or Universal. And we do a lot around what we call incubators, where we will take young, inexperienced writers and help them craft their stories. So I would say there's loads of places you can look. The BFI, the British Film Institute, is obviously a great place to start, and they do lots of courses for young new writers. Now, if you want to get on the business side, the one thing I've learned in my 10-year career is there are so many more people than Michael B. Jordan that makes this work. And I can tell you this, having been on a few Zooms lately, there is agents, there are script people, production assistants, and I would say a typical film set, not a film, but just a set when it's being shot, has over 2,000 different roles, from caterers to continuity directors, casting directors, everything. And then you think of this whole economy that is built around talent themselves, their managers, their PR, their communications people. It's kind of how I got into it. I knew very early on in college that I couldn't rap or sing as much as I tried. So I started managing friends. I realized I can do the business side really well, and in university, talent shows, events, etc. So there is a whole economy around entertainment. Often we see a film and we see the 10 or so main credits of actors and maybe a director and producer, and we think that's all that went into it. But there is an entire industry, from costume designers. You could be brilliant at designing clothes. Animators, right? More and more studios are now opening animation studios. We have 2, Pixar and Disney, because we see animation as just another way of telling stories. We don't see it as just for kids, right? If you watch Soul, if you've seen Luca lately, that's not a story necessarily for kids, right? Even Toy Story, and 20 years ago, it's been 20 years since Toy Story first came out. I remember watching that. I think I was 10 or 11, and I thought that was a brilliant production then, and I still think it's a brilliant production now. So British Film Institute and all of the different companies that support that for grassroots storytellers, and even local community centres are now getting into that to help people.
I think that's really, really, really useful stuff. And I particularly like the bit you were saying around obviously the self-production, and if sort of being supportive of a creative friend. Actually, I really like what you do, and I can hike stuff around for you. I can make those calls, do those contacts. We can book the venue, all of these types of things that you can do with a group. And I think maybe that's one thing that a lot of young people out there have got so much talent, and it's getting it out there would be really, really fascinating to see how they do that too.
Yeah, I think collaborating with your friends who have, maybe they have that particular talent of being able to get onto the phone and convince people to listen to them, and you are just very happy to be a creative. I think bringing people together, I have this analogy of, it's an architectural one, but let the door be the door, let the window be the window. If you're particularly good at something, then lean into doing that really well. If you're a great creative, be a great creative. If you're a great business person, be a great business person, but bring them together, right? And bring those skills together so that creative has someone that knows how to negotiate, or can certainly have a conversation about negotiating for them. And that creative can focus on their creative path and their endeavors there.
Having said all of that, did you kind of always know that this was going to be your trajectory, or did you kind of, I don't know, wanted to do something completely different, and this is where we're at?
Yeah, this is where we're at. I still don't think my mum's very proud, but I went to uni. I did finance, both for my undergraduate and for my postgraduate masters. I graduated in 2008. A lot of people won't remember this, but for the older lot, it was the year of the credit crunch, and nobody in finance had a job, and nobody wanted to work in finance. So I finished my masters in 2008. I was working in retail at the time for O2 retail stores, and I was there 3 months post. I was like, I've got a master's. How can I not have a job? So I was like, I'm not going to follow the finance path anymore. Leaned into what I knew was my skills and things that I enjoyed. I think Rhiannon said it also. And I just started applying for companies that I liked. And the first company that gave me a phone call was Channel 5. And I liked them because they had all the drama series, CSI, Law and Order. Again, a lot of people probably don't watch that anymore, but I thought they were brilliant at the time. So I thought, I wouldn't mind working on these productions. I'll apply for Channel 5. And I remember getting the phone call. I think weeks after I applied, and the person said, hi, this is, I know, Marika from Channel 5. I got very, very excited because also Channel 5 had a show called The Gadget Show. And every week they used to give away like 10 grand worth of gadgets. I remember once I had applied for it and I was like, I've won. I've got 3 plasmas coming to my house, a couple of Xboxes. She's like, I'm calling about the job. I was like, oh, so, that was anticlimactic. But the great story is I learned something brand new. And I got into Channel 5 in a compliance role. So the role I did at Channel 5 was we used to look at breaks and to see people used to pay a certain amount to be in a certain break. You used to see how much someone had paid and what break they should be in. If you've got more than 2 cars in a break, that's a conflict and a client might want their money back. So I actually did something very related to my financial skill set. And I did that for the first year. And I started to look over the floor, and there was a team called the Sponsorship and Partnerships team. And they used to go out and do all the really cool deals like the Gadget Show deal and etc. I was like, I really want to be in that team. And I spoke to the lady that headed up that team. I was like, can I help out? Here's a creative idea for a break. And I did that for about 6 months. And they actually made a role for me in their team. And I ended up joining that team, not for very long, for a year. I had another opportunity at ITV doing a similar thing. Got a phone call from my old boss's boss at Channel 5. He was starting at a new music video platform. And again, just want someone to be very creative and think of ideas. So I ended up joining him at Vivo. I was there for a couple of years, joined Sony Music because Sony owned half of Vivo. I worked with stakeholders at Sony. They liked that I was a creative thinker. For reasons, I wasn't at Sony for very long, went into my own company, got a phone call from Disney in 2015, and the rest is history. So I will say there is no master plan, none whatsoever. There's lots of small plans and pivots. And as you go through your career, you learn that. Even if you get to your mid-20s and you're unsure, and I think Matt said it right, he decided to make a career change late into his career. That is still very possible, and small pivots are the best way to do that. Everyone thinks I've got to jump and I've got to be president today. It won't happen like that. It will take some time. There will be lots of dips in that journey. But in the grand scheme of things, a very, very small dip in the grand scheme of your career. So don't rush yourself. Don't feel like you have to have it all worked out. It will get there, and you'll start to realize where your passion lies and where your skill sets are also.
I think that's such a useful bit of advice to follow. And I think we've been trying to say across all of the day that for the young people watching, you don't need to have a plan. It's okay not to have a plan. If some of you do, good on you, and go at it and enjoy the process. But don't worry if it goes wrong. Don't worry if it goes somewhere else. And I think what we've had, obviously, with yourself, Jason, and many other speakers is lots and lots of good examples of people that have found some really interesting roles that were just not, may not have even existed when we were young as well. Thank you so much for your time. If you're okay to stick around for a few more minutes, there's a few questions, and I'll bring the other speakers back in as well. But actually, I've just noted a question which I think is very much directed at you, Jason. I don't know how. There's part of it you can probably pick up. So Gerald says, I want to get involved in acting. I've got one question. How long can the production for each film and TV show take? That's quite varied.
Yeah, very varied. So I used the Fruitville Station example, which was Ryan Coogler's first production. That was shot, I think, in 5-6 days. Our Marvel movies, which we shoot here in the UK, actually, at Pinewood Studios, 3 to 4 months on set. And then you may want to shoot stuff. So it's a very, very, very varied. And often down to budget, right? If you've got a very small budget, you want to shoot everything in 2 or 3 days, so everyone can go and do other jobs. So it's very, very varied. Like with any creative endeavor, you don't want to rush it unnecessarily. But honestly, you can do a short film in a day, you can do a 20-minute feature film in a day if you wanted to.
Awesome. Thank you for taking that one on. So I think Kadeen and Matt's still around. If I can bring them back in just for our final wrap up. Hey Matt, how you doing?
Hey.
And hey Kadeen. So Rhiannon has another engagement she needs to get to. So just wanted to bring you back in and see if there are any questions from those watching. And I know that we've got a few questions that were posted ahead of time. The one theme I did want to pick up on with all three of you is Kadeen talked about a degree that ultimately wasn't necessarily relevant to the work you ended up doing. Jason, you've talked about that working in places that you were interested in, and Matt, you've talked about changing careers and kind of making that sort of tearing off the band-aid and going into a new area. Any advice for young people looking to sort of try something out or change? Is there any kind of advice that you would give around taking on a scary change, doing something a bit different, and that it can kind of help them with their next steps, whether it's onto A levels, getting out into the world of work, emerging after a year and a half of a pandemic into the world of work as well. I don't know who wants to take that one first. Matt, over to you.
I mean, I think the biggest piece of advice I could give in that regard is don't be afraid to fail. If you go through life never having failed, you've not tried hard enough. It's simple as that. Like I often say, I said when I was teaching with kids, do you think Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi could curl a free kick from 40 yards from birth? No. They were rubbish at football at one point too, and they have to sit and practice and try and learn from their failures. And practice doesn't just mean banging your head against a brick wall. It means being thoughtful and intelligent about reflecting on the things that you're doing. It's not just repeating the same thing and getting the same outcome. It's about really thinking carefully about what you're doing and the impact that you're having. And failure is just a stepping stone. And the most successful people in my experience are the ones who can learn from and embrace failure and get knocked down and feel down about it, but get back up and learn that lesson. And if you never take a risk, you never know what you can achieve.
Yeah, I massively agree with that. And just to add to your sports analogy, a hockey one, Wayne Gretzky, who is a hockey Hall of Famer, says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So without trying, you'll never know. And there is no harm in failing. We have all failed. If I was to sit here and chronicle my failures, it will take more time than my successes. That's what happens. One word of advice: internships, career programs, volunteering, all of those are super important. I think post-pandemic, we're also lacking social skills because we only live in these worlds now. So just getting back out there, interacting with people, and spending maybe a couple of weeks in a business that you like or a business that is connected to something you like would really help you know more about that business and just give you some life skills to take into a job if you're trying to change.
Thank you.
Katie, anything you want to add?
And I was going to say what Jason said, I think work experience and internships, they are really, really key to making sure that you kind of figure out what you like, what you don't like, and what works for you. You know, you might decide that you want a career in a particular field, and actually when you go and do your work experience, you figure out that actually it's not something that I'm as interested in as I thought. So definitely explore, take all the time that you need. There's literally no rush.
And we've heard a lot of talk about networks and building up those networks and groups of people around you. And I think that comes under that as well of, I remember that really, it was an awful role that they had at our organisation, but they were so positive and they worked hard every day. Actually, maybe I need to get in touch with them because I've now got another much more interesting role I think they'd be great for. I think those type of things are where they can put in the miles and then get the rewards afterwards with that network. We do have a question that was submitted during. So this is from Sophie. She was submitting during this session, so she may still be watching as well. She said, I don't really have a specific career path in mind, but have several interests that I would like to explore. So her question was, should I just go for an opportunity that comes my way and figure things out as I go, or plan ahead where my experience could take me in the future? I get a sense of where the panel might go, but I'll let you decide what you want to say.
I'd say both. Plan and try and direct it. But if something comes along, go for it. And everything's there's an opportunity cost to everything. And what that means is if you go for one opportunity, then all the other ones are closing. So every time you take something, you are missing out on other things. And no one other than you can tell you whether that opportunity is worth it or not. I've taken jobs because I've not had a job for 3 months, and it was just I just need this job. Any job, I just need to take it. I still got something out of it, and who knows if I'd have waited another 3 months, I might have landed my ideal job. And that's the opportunity cost, and that, I think that's a calculation that only you can do. Unfortunately, that would be my take on it.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else want to jump in on that one before we wrap up for today's session?
Yeah, I'm with Matt. It's both. From a business point of view, we always plan our business in 5 years and 1 year. So what do we think we're going to get to in 5 years, but also what are we doing this year? So absolutely plan, but also take opportunities. You may hit your 5-year goal in 5 years' time, but if you don't, it's always good to have those experiences in between. So yeah.
Kadeen, I don't know if in your line of work, 5-year plans quite quite the same scale. 1-day plans and 5-day plans?
Yeah.
Definitely not 5-day plan. That 5-year plan that changes within 5 minutes. But no, I would say I agree with both of what the guy said before. Literally, whatever opportunity you can have, just grab it. One opportunity can definitely lead to another. So never ever think that, oh, it's not exactly what I want to do. Just gain as much experience as you can.
Cool. And Sophie, if you are still watching, I hope that gives you that impetus to go and approach it in both ways. And we look forward to seeing your success in the near future. Thank you so much to our guests, Rhiannon, Jason, Kadeen and Matt, for your contributions today. It's been really interesting. I mean, I'm living the dream, speaking to so many different people about so many different things. So for Marika and I, we're really enjoying the process, and we thank you for your time. So thank you so much. We'll obviously sort of pass out any questions that might come along related to that, and we'll also obviously sort of share any links you might want to send on about opportunities in your fields, like Matt's graduate program and things like that as well. So thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of the day, and just a massive thank you from us and everyone watching for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks a lot. Okay, so Marika, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
It's been a good one.
Yeah.
And then just before we go, a little sneak peek of session 1 for tomorrow. So tomorrow we've got some great speakers again. I'll just give you a little insight into who's coming along. There we go. So I'll leave you with this thought. There is no master plan, just lots of small mini plans, which seems to fit in with Sophie's question as well.
Yes.
Cheers, Marika. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.